How's it going, guys? Welcome to another episode of Spark Notes. It's January 19th. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about California bike laws, working with powerful lithium, shipping to Canada, storage in the Javelin, charging times, water resistance, theft deterrence, and a few other odds and ends. So, one of the first questions on there was, what is the bike to my side? I think somebody saw the rear wheel of a bike that was next to me in the last video. Let's take a quick look at that. Here, this is an electric Honda Grom. It's not a true Honda, it's like a knockoff. But there's a guy who lives in our town that's been working on this thing, and he's pretty much stuck, so he brought it to us to see what we could do. And so I told him, I'll take it on and we'll turn it into a YouTube series where I will use all of Spark's harnesses to update the lighting, put a far driver on it, a bunch of other cool stuff, and you guys can tag along. So yeah, that bike is going to be kind of a fun side project. It's going to allow us to do a bunch of different examples with the lighting kits. It's going to be a fun project for us to work with powerful lithium on, show you guys how to do things with the controller, all that kind of stuff. So expect that video series to begin in probably about 2 weeks. So yeah, there's been a lot of news about California e-bike laws. They are very complicated, it seems. I'm seeing a lot of misinformation, a lot of people having different thoughts on what the rules actually mean. We're kind of letting this dust settle right now, trying to wade through all of this information. But the bottom line for Spark is, since our inception, we have always made our bikes legal to ride on the roads. And what I mean by that is, of course, people would have their 750 watt and under e-bikes riding legally on the road. But above that, it was this whole legal gray area on when it becomes a motorcycle. And so because of that, our powerful bike called the Bandit was kind of in a confusing spot. And so we decided to put VINs and supply people with an MCO and all this other stuff so that in the future, if laws like this came into effect, you were protected and you could register your bike if you needed to, in whatever level that might be. And so what that means for us now is that we are continuing that, and the Brute and the Javelin still come with an MCO, a VIN, bill of sale, everything you need to make that legal to ride in your area. Now, we build the bikes according to the federal guidelines for a motor-driven cycle. That is a 5 horsepower bike. And then we can also step it down to 2 horsepower depending on where we are shipping this thing in the country. We can adjust all those things to your state requirements, and we set them up specific for people all the time. And so if you buy a bike with us, we can set it up to meet your exact legal needs and ship it out so you're good to go. I don't know how this is all going to continue in California, but I definitely see the rest of the country kind of following suit with these laws. I think it's only a matter of time before states start doing a registration on e-bikes. It could be a small amount, but it's something that I think is coming. And then another common question related to the whole California deal was all around certifications. So I don't think it's going to be an immediate thing that everybody has to have UL certifications on their batteries. I do think it's going to come here in the next 4 or 5 years where, it's just going to be a standard around the entire country that you need them. But getting a UL certification on an entire bike is a really expensive thing. I know that for us, it would be, somewhere around $100,000 to do it. And to a large manufacturer, that's nothing. But to us, that's a pretty big price to pay. So, like the batteries that we sell, they all have some basic certs on them. They're CE, RoHS, all that kind of stuff. And they're high quality batteries. It's just that the cost to get those UL certifications are crazy expensive. And so that's just our standard right now. And you're going to see that being common across a lot of other e-bikes. But I do think it's going to be one way to weed out a lot of direct shipment bikes, ones that are going right from AliExpress to your door. So, we'll see. I think it will be a good thing for the end user. I do think the rules are going to get tighter and tighter and tighter, and we just have to adapt. In terms of powerful lithium, a few people asked us, what we're doing with powerful lithium. Do we have any projects going on with them? I do, yeah. So, we mentioned the electric Grom project over here. I'm going to work with them to have a battery put in that bike. But yeah, we are actively talking to them to see if we can have them do a battery for Javelin, and a little range extender battery, I think, is another big goal of ours to have for both Brute and Javelin. You know, they are really high quality batteries, amazing outputs. Those guys make incredible stuff, and I would love to have the option to have that on our bike. And even though that we don't have it directly on our site right now, you can talk to Powerful Lithium and see if they can make a battery for your bike, because we offer Javelin without battery. So when you do the whole purchasing link window, you can go to the bottom and select no battery, and it deducts the cost of that battery. So you can already do it. You can just buy the bike without battery and have them make it for you. How hard would it be to put a motorcycle fork, or how beneficial would it be to put a motorcycle fork on a traditional e-bike like a Super 73 or Bandit? I would say out of difficulty, that's like a 7 or 8 out of 10. It's not easy. This person did mention that we did it on a Bandit about a year ago for somebody, and to do it, we had to use our head tube reaming device that we use for the Javelin, and that allowed us to put in the proper bearings. So you need a special set of bearings. And on top of that, had to use a couple little spacers because that motorcycle fork wasn't perfectly designed for an e-bike. And then besides doing all that machine work, you then need to get a motorcycle wheel, a motorcycle tire, and a set of brakes, including the brake caliper. So, you know, while that all sounds like a lot, those parts are actually pretty expensive. So yeah, I mean, you can probably go to eBay and buy a pit bike, front fork, and brake setup and front wheel for maybe $300 or $400. You will then need to put a different tire on it, because a lot of those kits are using like a pretty bad knobby tire that's going to last like maybe 100 miles. But it comes down to the machining of the head tube that is difficult. And I will say, even if you got all that right, you got all the tools, you got all the machining done, it's still kind of sketchy, because the head tubes on a lot of those bikes are usually pretty thin, and they're usually aluminum, and you could put this whole fork on there and it'd be great, and then it just cracks the head tube. So it's a little scary. You know, for a traditional e-bike, I would probably just say stick to finding a inverted front fork with some nice heavy-duty stanchions, and get a good set of traditional e-bike brakes. And on the note of brakes, I've had a ton of emails about our brake kits. Yes, gosh, guys, I know. I feel bad about the brakes, because I put it up there, and I didn't expect it to get like crazy. The number of emails and DMs for people asking about the brakes has been pretty insane. And I am working on it, but I put it on hold for a few months because Christmas was nuts, and we were just trying to fulfill current orders. And so January is very slow, and we usually use January to get ahead. Right now, the team is just building up inventory of subcomponents. We got a handful of Brutes that are on open, but we are just building sub-assemblies right now to get through all those guys. While the team is working on that, I'm working on some specialty projects, which include the brake kit and the pedal kit for Jav, and a couple other odds and ends. So yes, I am desperately trying to get that done. It is complicated, to say the least. Canada. Let's talk about shipping to Canada. So yes, we have had a very interesting phenomenon going on right now with our orders for Javelin and Brute. And for those watching, I am desperate to know what's going on. But the number of bikes that we have sent to Seattle and Oregon and Wyoming, that whole area is like crazy. And we're now getting a huge demand from right across the border into Canada for people that want our bikes. Right now, we don't have a way to ship to Canada. If anybody out there has any recommendations, we're all ears. Our company that we use right now, called Haul Bikes does not offer shipping to Canada, which is a bummer. And then we've had just traditional freight methods quoted, and it's been like over $3,000 to get a bike imported into Canada. I don't really know where to go for handling that whole deal. The other side to Canada is, they have their own legalities. And so it'll get to the point where we'll have to figure out how to build the bikes according to their legalities, if they're any different. But yeah, right now I don't have an option. But maybe something, along the lines of like, if I can find a shop in Seattle or in the Washington area that would take on our bikes, maybe people in that area would be willing to drive an hour or so across the border and pick up a bike and bring it back that way. But yeah, I don't know. It is kind of funny on YouTube. I know he's probably going to watch this, Wyoming Rider. He's like one of our biggest supporters. Love that guy. But it's like, as soon as we got an order for a brute from him, it was like the entire part of that country just started ordering bikes from us. I think we've probably sent, 15 brutes out in that area, something like that. It's kind of crazy. Question here about the charging enhancer from PidZoom. So yeah, there are some questions going on about the chargers. So for any e-bike, not just ours, you need to really be careful about the charger you use on it. If you want to buy an aftermarket charger for your battery and all these kinds of things. So the main things that you have to look for are fuses on the charging ports. So we don't have a specific fuse on the brute battery charging port, but a lot of like traditional e-bikes will put one on there, and it's usually like 2 to 3 amp. And so you could go get a 10 amp charger and then plug it in, and it will just immediately blow that fuse. So it doesn't matter what you do, you're just going to keep on blowing that fuse. So the main things to look for are what the electrical rating is of the connector that battery is using. So for us, it's like an XLR cable kind of plug in right now. And that is rated maybe 7 amps, if we're being like really crazy, maybe 8. And then from there, you're going to lose some of the rating depending on what kind of wire is connecting that port to the battery itself. So you might have a port that's rated to high enough amps, and then your battery maker could have used a really thin gauge wire on the charging port, and now you just lost another amp or two. So you really need to check the electrical ratings of those ports, and that is all published knowledge. So like you can look up what is the current rating of an XLR cable connector, what is the cable rating of a NEMA connector, all those things, and it'll say it, and then kind of go from there. But there are these crazy chargers that can put out like 30 plus amps, and that is awesome. I wish we could use that on everything, but they just won't work with our batteries. The reason we chose the chargers we did were a couple reasons. For one, they were fairly affordable. There's a big factor there. Some of these chargers can get in the hundreds of dollars. And so our charger is not in the hundreds of dollars. It's more like 50 or 60 bucks. And then the big thing, which is the more interesting thing, is the circuit breakers in people's houses. So when we did initial testing, we were sending prototypes out. We actually had people that were using like a 10 amp charger, just a 10 amp charger, and circuit breakers were blowing in people's houses. A lot of these circuits in like old houses may say like 30 amps that they're rated to, but they're just old and worn out. And sometimes, like especially like in apartments in like New York City and things like that, those circuits are like, they're really old. And so we decided to put a 10 amp in Javelin. I think Brute is a 5 amp, if I remember correctly. A lot of numbers right now. And that was just to kind of make sure that everybody was going to get a fast charging time and be affordable, and also not keep on blowing everybody's circuit breakers. And in terms of charging time, I know that was asked quite a bit in here. It depends on how charged your battery is, right? But most of the time we're seeing like 3 to 5 hours depending on how dead it is. And so, most of our use case is people are riding to work. Let's say, we got people riding 30 plus miles to work, and then they'll take the bike, lock it up, remove the battery, and then they'll charge the battery at work while they're working, and then ride home. That's really, really common. Another question here. You keep on mentioning that there's room for storage in the Javelin. Yeah, there's a lot of room for storage in the Javelin. Let's go take a quick look at that. All you got to do is you just pull this up. Look at that. Now I have a huge storage area, guys. This is enough to fit your charger in here. You could put like a 6-pack in here. It is a huge space. We tried to make it big enough so that if you ever wanted to someday, it would be big enough to hold another battery that's about half this size. Now, we don't make a battery like that, but there are plenty companies just like Powerful Lithium out there that are making batteries, and you know, this might be something to think about down the road. It's a really handy little storage area. You go out, run an errand, you don't have to have a backpack on you. You just put whatever you wanted right in there. So that's a really helpful feature. That was one of the design goals of the bike, was to have a way so that you didn't have to have a rear rack or carry a backpack or something. You can just use the bike storage compartment itself. All right, another question. What is the limiting factor for top speed on the motors? So right now, the limiting factor is the RPM rating of the motors. So on any electrical motor, they will specify the RPM rating. And the motors that we use are from QS, and QS specifies the maximum RPMs that that motor can handle. And so, you know, even if we tripled the amps to that motor or did anything, it wouldn't matter, because we would never want to go above the RPM rating of that motor. If I remember correctly, I'm probably off by a little bit here, guys, but the motor we use, I think, is rated to 850 RPMs. Might be off again. Don't come hunting for numbers. But, you know, so if you have that many RPMs, and then you take the wheel size, and you can use those two numbers to calculate what the maximum top speed is. So, you know, one motor that's rated to 850 RPMs, if you put a smaller wheel on it, well, now that top speed is going to be different, because the motor can only spin so fast, right? But you're going to get more torque out of it having a smaller wheel size. So that's one of the reasons why we went from a 19-inch rear wheel to a 17-inch on the back. It gave us a little bit more torque off the line, and allowed it so that we didn't completely kill our top speed. So, you know, most people on Javelin are getting like 60 miles an hour, something like that. But yeah, the RPM rating is a good one. But so theft deterrence. This is a question we get a lot. Yeah, it's one of the little quirks of the Javelin and the Brute right now, where the seats open up, but they don't have a lock on them. And it's more so set up so it's like almost like a hidden feature, where, you know, unless you knew the bike, it would be pretty uncommon to see a seat open up like that. Like I literally cannot think of a single other two-wheel vehicle that has a seat that opens up like Javelin does. And so the fact that the battery's in there and the battery's even removable is rare. But it's still a concern. So, I mean, you obviously have your keyed ignition to turn the bike on and off, but I think an additional lock to keep the seat, you know, from being open, I don't think is a crazy idea. And it's something that I'm working on. My solution to it is not going to be that complicated, but it's the downside is you basically would need another key. So your bike will have to have the ignition key, and you'll have to have a separate key to open up the seat. And to some people, that's a little bit of a pain in the butt, but maybe it's worth it if, you know, you don't have to worry about your battery getting stolen. So I am working on that. I have a couple ideas on how to make them like drop in accessories for like the Brute, stuff like that. But it's going to take a little bit of time. I'm trying to work some other projects out, but it's definitely on the radar. Water resistance. This is a really common question. Water resistance ratings on our bikes. So one of the big things that we did is we use these really fancy, I believe they're NEMA 7 connectors on everything that's external. And so those connectors have an O-ring seal, and they are threaded. And that's really cool because it means we don't need to use any heat shrink on them. So like taking things apart, replacing parts is really simple. And it means that those things are like waterproof to the point where you can submerge them in water and they're okay. The only components that are not really highly protected is the controller. And the controller, you know, has leads on the top, these terminals, and that's where the motor cables and the battery cable screw into it. And there's no way to waterproof that really. And so what we have to do is we have to put it into its own enclosure. And so that whole deal is what is kept inside the frame and is behind multiple layers to keep that waterproof. So, you couldn't throw one of our bikes into a lake, but you can certainly ride in the rain, and you'll be perfectly fine. Sabaton controller, 72 volt battery with a 40 amp hour capacity, QS273 3.5T. What are my specs? So I love that you gave the battery voltage and capacity, but the big question is, what is your BMS rating? So you need to take whatever your BMS rating is and do a couple little math tricks. So let's say, for example, you find out that your BMS is rated to 100 amps continuous. I would step that down as your current rating. So if you go to your Sabaton, change your current rating to 80 if you want to be safe, 90 if you want to be risky, and then change your phase amps to whichever of those numbers you picked times about 2.5. And then take it out and run it quite a few times and see if your system shuts off. It should be pretty safe within those numbers. If it shuts off, you just have to turn it off, turn it back on. Let's say, for example, you have a 72 volt and you have some crazy BMS. It's rated to like 500 amps or something nuts. I don't even know if they have a battery like that right now. You should take a look at the ratings of QS motors and make sure that you're not going to go beyond the power rating of it. A 72 volt battery with like a 100 amp BMS, a 3.5T winding, something like that. If you've got either like a 17, 18, 19 inch wheel, you're probably going to be hitting like 65, 70 miles an hour. So just like we were saying before, you need to check the RPM ratings. I think the 3.5T, I think is rated closer to like 900 or 950 RPMs. But if you go to QS Motors website and you look up their 3,000 watt motor, it will tell you exactly what the RPM rating is and everything else you need to know. So it's all on their website. QS is really good about that. EV charging stations. So this is kind of like similar to what I was talking about before with chargers. Right now, like our bikes, you can't just like pull up to like a car charger and plug it in. So yeah, the charging stations, those plugs are all like very, very expensive. So that would be like a huge additional cost to add to the bike. And while it might be interesting for some parts of the country, right now, I think the fact that we've designed the bikes so that you can put your charger in the bike itself, so that it's always on you, and like the Javelin is a 10 amp charger. That's about the best solution that we can come up with right now that isn't insanely expensive and going to add a lot of complexity. Because at the end of the day, we try to make the product so it's going to work for a lot of people, not just one specific use case for somebody. And having that 10 amp charger, storage in the bike, that whole system was our alternative to adding, a $500 plus plug so that you could use a car charger. Some questions about other brands. What do you think about the Beachman Aviator? I don't know much about their brand. I definitely have gotten their ads. I think it's a beautiful bike. It looks just like a little Honda CB. Everybody loves the cafe racers. One thing I will say, looking at the specs I saw online, they all seem to be pretty accurate, which is cool. I haven't seen anything about crazy peak numbers and range claims of like 100, 150 miles. Everything that I've seen listed on their website looks pretty accurate. But I've never seen one in person. I've never ridden one, but it looks like a cool bike. All right. So one last thing I would like to say, I got a handful of emails from some of our customers. I just want to clarify, I'm not doing this series specifically for specific customer repair requests and things like this. This is more of kind of a community type of video setup. So let's say you have a broken component on your bike, you got in a wreck or something, or even just a question on a bike that you just got in. So if you already have a bike that you purchased from Spark, you have our direct line of communication. So send an email to info@sparkcycleworks.com, and we will talk to you right there. I want to keep the email chains there. This whole series, the help at sparkcycleworks.com, this is more of a community series where I'm trying to help people who don't necessarily have our bikes, but have projects of their own or questions about anything in the PEV scene. So I just want to make that really clear. But yeah, if you have any questions you guys want me to answer, you can leave a comment right below this video. That would be great. And give me a thumbs up and a subscription. And just, if you have anything really technical, you got to send pictures. You can also send that to help@sparkcycleworks.com, and I will take a closer look. All right, I'll see you in the next one.